Opinions are like bung bungs. Everybody's got one, and boy, do they want you to see it. Wait, what? No, that's not. My name is Marco. I'm a pro opera singer turned voice actor. I love talking about video game music from an emotional perspective. And today, we're going to be talking about your hottest video game music takes. Here we go. Video game companies should have their OSTs in readily accessible places with more lax fair use rules about them. You know, instead of having to rely on random YouTube channels who are at risk of getting nuked from orbit by Nintendo's legal team to listen to my favorite OSTs. I looked it up and it's a bit more complicated than both of us thought. The thing about video game music is that it often involves multiple stakeholders. Composers, performers, record labels. The rights to distribute the music can be super complex, and negotiating all of these can be really difficult and not straightforward. Don't forget about revenue streams. Companies may prefer to sell their OSTs separately as special editions or on music platforms or standalone products that would help make additional revenue. Companies are all about making money at the end of the day, so even though we want to enjoy music wherever we are, they won't allow that to be fair use necessarily if it means not possibly making money. Not only that, but by keeping a tight control over the music, companies can actually protect themselves so that things that are posted online react and respond to their brand and vision. God only knows how someone will mix and remix their favorite OST, and a company has to be careful of something like that. Not to mention that some companies might not even see the value in pumping forth the effort that's required to make sure that those songs get out there in the real world. But more than anything, I think it's really due to regionality. There's different laws of the land for each region of the world. So while something might be okay over here, it won't be okay somewhere else in the world. So it's a little inconsistent on how it's going to be available to us throughout the world. But that said, it's a great take and I agree with you. I wish it was easier to listen to my favorite pieces of music and not have to go onto YouTube or something to listen to it. It sucks. And I do try to purchase as many soundtracks as possible to support not only the composers, but also my favorite games. So I hear you on that one. There's probably an insane amount of amazing OSTs that are going to be lost to time. And another comment further down said there's lots of really good video game music that gets missed by YouTube at large because the games are either old, niche, unpopular, or it's a great soundtrack on a mediocre game, and content creators unfortunately have to chase the algorithm. That's certainly true, but I want to change one thing, because the algorithm follows the audience. So unfortunately, some of us are beholden to what the audience wants. And so a perfect example of this is something like Suikoden. I have fallen in love with Suikoden's music. I love it. The problem is, it doesn't play. There are no views. It's really difficult. The Legend of Spyro, the remakes, have amazing soundtracks. Super classical, could easily fit into a symphonic hall. That's really exciting to me. But the problem is that that's not going to be a desirable thing for a lot of people to listen to. And a lot of us stay in our boxes and we stay tapped into what we know and understand. And obviously the things that we have emotional connections to. So if you and I didn't play Legend of Spyro, we might not give a shit about it, even though the music is profoundly meaningful and good. And so it's our job, and partially I feel like it's my responsibility as well, to continue to showcase music that may be off the beaten path. Because the thing is, someone is going to like something that they don't know yet. And teaching and allowing for people to be exposed to new music is the way that we move that needle. That needle is going to move a little bit, but just a little bit is enough to cause sometimes an avalanche of new tastes and exploration. But you're right, and I do believe that that is part of my job, to help video game music from an older time period be understood, respected, and admired as much as it probably was when it first released on those individual platforms from the 90s or the thousands or even beyond. The worst thing about video game tracks is that most of them are designed to loop and thus don't have a satisfying ending. That's a totally valid thought process. The loop pattern is a really interesting one, and it's so unique to video game music exclusively. Good loops do tend to sometimes have a button that then segues, almost like when you see those shorts where you're watching the short and then it resets. And so there's a through line there, but a lot of the older tracks that were just loops just kept doing that over and over and over again. And yeah, that's definitely something that people have listened to and commented on, that it is a little bit boring or it doesn't really go anywhere, right? And that's something that's really interesting, is that when a song starts and ends, it has a beginning, middle, and an end. There's a whole story being told. But when a loop occurs, we sort of get stuck in that pattern, which you're absolutely right about, and we never get that resolution that makes us feel there's something so powerful about the end of a phrase where all of a sudden your body relaxes and you've released yourself from that musical experience, and I agree with you in that case. Even after recent years of recognition, video game music is still underestimated and underappreciated in present day, even by video game music lovers. A common symptom is when licensed songs are featured in a game. No one would bat an eye hearing a game original, but the moment the licensed song plays, the average person would react like something along the lines of, oh hey, it's a real song. I see your point. And I think that that's a thread that we just have to continue to push. Until video game music gets thrust into the mainstream, if ever, and there are certain pieces like Guilty Gear or League, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, or any of the Casey Edwards or the Barry Lights of the world, or even Doom, once that music gets out into the public, if ever, which it seems unlikely that it ever will, that's when we can start to ingrain ourselves into the society at large. But until we do that, yeah, we are corralled in this little pocket, and this pocket is the video game music pocket, and that's where it all stays. And so we have 40 plus years of incredible music, from beeps and boops all the way up to modern classical music and beyond, that is relegated to this little box. And it's our job to continue to advocate for music's awareness, for musical understanding, so that we can start to show people, hey, listen, and then we move that needle just a little bit, and that continues to hopefully fan the cycle so that other people will come on board and say, hey, you know what? I don't play video games, but man, did that song slap. No, Genshin music did not fall off ever since Yu Peng Chen stopped working there. The music they make is still peak, and anyone disagreeing with this needs to get their ears and head checked. You could have been a little less passive aggressive, or maybe just aggressive in general, but that's gonna happen. We have to assume that when a composer leaves a team, that team is then going to bring their own lived in musical experiences and bring those things into the experience. It's never going to be the same way twice. There is an opera by Puccini called Turandot. He died before the end. Once he died, they said, we're going to stop it here. We're never going to finish it. And then that ending has been redone 4 times. And I guarantee you, every single time, it has not been the same as Puccini wrote it. Even though they are writing in the style of Puccini, it will never be the way that Puccini wrote it. And that's something that we have to accept. Music evolves and changes based on the lived experience of the composer who comes forth and provides that for us. We can't expect it to sound like Yu Peng Chen because it's not being composed by Yu Peng Chen anymore. And that's okay. What we need to do is decide, do I like this or do I not like it? And move on. There's no reason to be dogmatic about it. Either you're a fan of it or you're not, and it's okay. Leitmotifs are not inherently cheap. There are still people out there that think they are, but good usage of them can just make each track and every track in a soundtrack so special and personal. I love interconnected soundtracks. It's an interesting hot take because later on in the comments, someone said, I hate the overuse of leitmotif, and I can see both sides of this argument. Some people would say that leitmotifs that are all the time, all over the place, cheapen it, degrade it, and make it kind of not as impactful. Whereas this comment is saying that leitmotifs are not inherently cheap and actually raise the emotional stakes, and both are true. Leitmotif is a term coined by Wagner to symbolize when a character makes an entrance or when something is mentioned. When Valhalla is mentioned in Wagner's The Ring Cycle, we always hear the same tune. Wotan has a theme, Albrecht has a theme, Loge sounds like fire because he's a god of fire, and so that has a specific leitmotif. So we have to understand the difference between motif, which is a general thematic element, versus leitmotif, which is really the noun of music. So that's really evocative, but we have to agree to disagree that sometimes it can be a little bit too much. There has to be a balance. Now, that said, we can hear a theme earlier part in a game and then hear it at the pivotal moment, and that really hits us where it hurts. You know what I mean? There's a scene in Xenoblade Chronicles where we hear the main theme of the game as it starts, and then we also hear it in the prologue, but in a different context. That's a wonderful example of how a motif is used. But every time there's a big pivotal scene, we also hear Engage the Enemy. And Engage the Enemy is the motif of the emotional connectedness of each individual scene. That is a case where a motif works beautifully. That said, sometimes, in my personal opinion, in Final Fantasy XIV, we hear a motif over and over and over. Now, it can enhance the moment that motif really comes to fruition in the game, but it can also be a little bit like, okay, I get it, that's the theme from whatever. So there's a balance that has to be struck. I agree with both sides. If a game soundtrack is dramatic and epic, it doesn't mean it's good. I think that's a completely valid hot take. One of my favorite songs from Nier Automata, City Ruins, is basically lo-fi. It's not dramatic, and epic. I love the theme from Elden Beast. It's one of the coolest final boss themes ever. It's slow, it's got harp, it's got a single vocal. I love that they didn't go with the thing that you hear right before Radagon of the Golden Order, which is the complete opposite. Textually, thematically, that makes a whole bunch of sense, but it's true. You usually expect a final boss to be epic and dramatic. And dramatic and epic, if it's too much, like anything else, it doesn't work. I agree with that. Implementation of an OST is just as important as the song in a vacuum. Counter comment, a good song's job isn't to stand alone by itself, but to benefit the scene or situation that is currently taking place. Being able to stand out itself is a bonus. Now, you know where I stand on this. Context matters. Video game music, like opera, is written to cater to specific moments on stage or in the TV. There are specific moments that are elevated by the music that we hear. However, music that is really good can be elevated outside of that context and be appreciated regardless of what you see. And I think that this is a common issue where some folks aren't able to extend themselves out of what they've seen. And we have a responsibility to ourselves to understand why we like something, not just because it triggers an emotional and visual response, but because we have to understand what it is inside of us that connects to a piece of music. I personally feel that it's our responsibility to understand why we feel what we feel, not because it's being handed to us on a platter. Hey, you should feel this way because of this moment. It's okay if you feel that way, but I would urge you to dig deeper, to really listen to the individual components of a piece and understand away from the context, to understand why you feel what you feel. I think that's really important. I think there's a lot of value in that. If you don't want to, by all means, live your life. I personally enjoy thinking about music outside of the context and in the context, where it's naturally supposed to be. Both are valid. Classical music only exists in video games. No, that's not true. Do you want to hear more hot takes? Let me know in the comments below and we'll see what we can do for a part 2. Thanks a ton, and I'll see you later.